Hey folks, this is Philip with the Everyday Fighter podcast, and I wanted to welcome you to this episode. Today we are talking with Jesse Hinds. Jesse is just a great guy to talk with, particularly if you are interested in the fight world and in martial arts. He's just got such a breadth of experience with it, from boxing to taekwondo, kung fu, BJJ. I mean, it's great to hear his perspective and enthusiasm for all things in the fight world. But one of the other things that I'm looking forward to sharing with you from this conversation is his relationship with his son and how that has changed since his son has started training in the martial arts as well. It's just a great example of how a new dynamic can be added to your relationship with your children just to make it that much richer. And I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. But before we get into that, I did want to get into our episode spotlight. As a reminder, these spotlights are unsponsored. These folks or organizations have no idea that I'm doing this, but I feel that they're just doing such great work that I wanted to do my part in sharing what they're doing and get some attention to them. And today I wanted to talk about the Good Dad Project. Now, this is a community and a podcast that comes from Larry Hagner. Actually, Larry was a guest on our podcast not long ago, but he just created this amazing community focused around dads and bringing them together in a community that just supports each other. A lot of times as a parent, it can be challenging to feel like you're just kind of alone in it. Now, I mean, for myself, I'd seen a lot of Facebook groups and support groups for women, mothers, but I didn't really see anything for dads. And when I found the Good Dad Project, it was really not only a surprise, but something that was kind of a relief. Like, oh my gosh, I don't feel like I'm alone. And when you see these guys in their groups, virtual groups, talking to each other, supporting each other, sharing the things that have been challenging, but also the wins for them as well. It's just a great, great thing to see. And I highly recommend the Good Dad Project, as well as Larry's podcast, The Dad Edge, to you if you are a father. So you can find more about them at gooddadproject.com. So that is our episode spotlight. And with that, let's jump into the interview with Jesse Hinds.
Tacoma, Washington.
Okay.
The state, and I actually live at a pretty cool community place called Salmon Beach. It's about 80 houses. They're on the bottom of a pretty significant bluff. You walk up the trail from the houses to the parking lot where the cars are, and Fitbit says you've just climbed about 12 flights of stairs. I grew up there, and it's bottom of a bluff covered in kind of woods, and then the houses are actually built on pilings on the beach. So Puget Sound, the saltwater of Puget Sound, like the tide comes in and out under your house, which is awesome, except in winter when there's a storm and you get stuff, crashing around under your house. It's like, it's pretty unique, I think. But kind of grew up down there, and as a kid, basically spent my time running around in the woods on the beach. I was always into fiction, fantasy, and so making wooden swords and shields was, that's what we did. I mean, I've got scars, from running around and just beating the hell out of friends, and then beating the crap out of me.
Yeah,
it was great. It was fantastic.
Great friends, best of friends.
Yeah, exactly. And some of them are still like best friends today. It's like,
absolutely.
That's how you bond. So then was an actor, moved up to Seattle for a while and was a stage and film actor for about 12 years. Basically decided I didn't want to move to LA or New York, and wanted to start a family, which not a lot of actors that I knew that were making the business happen for them. That was something that not all of them, but a lot of them had to sacrifice to make that life happen for them. And it wasn't willing to do that. 9/11 also happened around then. So I became an EMT, drove ambulance, volunteer fire department, and worked in a children's hospital in the ER all over about 7 years, kind of testing that out. Particularly the ER stint proved that that's not a capacity that I can work with kids, especially having one of my own at that point. I was like, I can't see this on a daily basis and stay right in the head, So I became a teacher, which, that seemed along that same road, but without the, I thought there was going to be less bodily fluids, but really as a teacher, you kind of see it all too. I mean, it can be gross. So I didn't get away from that, but I did get away from some of the darker stuff, which was good. I know a lot of guys in EMS, fire, police, and I've got my authority issues, and so grew up really without a lot of respect for people in law enforcement. And then my first wife, her brother was actually LA County Sheriff. And right, about the same time as I met him, I was doing EMS, and I got to tell you, I was like, you do this every day. You see people on their worst day ever. Even if it's somebody who their worst day ever seems to be happening on a weekly basis during your shift,
Yeah.
It takes a gift and a skill that I don't have the gift, and wasn't acquiring the skill fast enough to not let it change me in some ways that I wasn't really happy about. So education, teaching, my mom was an educator. My grandmother was an educator. My first wife, my second wife. I mean, it's education is I'm steeped in it. So that was kind of the route that I ended up going and finding myself in. And I'm currently a librarian in an elementary school. So I get kids hooked on books and teach them a little bit about technology.
Dude, coolest librarian ever. What the hell?
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I've got all my my little all the kids, very rapidly figure out that I'm very into Star Wars and that whole world, and that seems a good hook. So I'll, first couple of months, I've always got a Star Wars T-shirt on, and I'm like, oh yeah, and I've got Star Wars toys kind of around the library that I've collected over the years, and that helps kind of helps make a little bit of a superficial connection long enough for them to me or for me to be able to then go, hey, so if you like that, here's a book you should read, kid. And then then by the end of the year they're coming into the library going, okay, what's the next book in that series, or what's another series that's good? And I'm like, oh, there you go, gotcha. So that's kind of that's kind of my approach to what I'm doing right now, which is pretty cool.
So is it what I think I don't know if I missed it, the what the ages, what grade?
It's elementary, so it's kindergarten through 5th grade.
Okay.
We do 5th grade here, and then they do middle school.
And how old is your child?
My youngest is 2.5, and my oldest, I keep saying he's 12. He has a month to go.
Oh, okay.
But his attitude and the way he's starting to live life, I'm sure he would love me sharing this beyond the house. But yesterday at our 4th of July, the neighbors had they have 2 teenage girls, like 16 and 14, and then a 12-year-old boy his age, and then an 11 or 12-year-old girl, 10 or 11, sorry, I think she was 11. And the boy wasn't there, and the girls had some friends over. So there's this whole squad of, teen and the youngest being barely preteen girls over there with, water balloons and squirt guns. And he filled his squirt guns up. He's like, I'm going to go over there. And then he almost bailed. I mean, you could see the look on his face, and he was just super intimidated. And he's like, Dad, I don't think I want to go over there. I don't know. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, this is an opportunity. And this is something that you will never see anything like this again for the rest of your life, dude. And in my head, I'm like, you have to go over. Otherwise, there was a part of you and a part of me that will regret this forever. And I was like, no, you sneak around the back, you hide over at that corner, you nail the first one that comes around the corner. We're talking tactics. And, I said, sometimes it's preparation and sometimes victory goes to the swift.
Yeah.
He was like, okay, Dad. And he ran over there, played for a couple hours. And I was like, I couldn't have been a prouder dad at that moment. I was like, oh, that's so cool. That's awesome.
Oh, that's so good.
But yeah, so, segue.
Yeah.
A lot of those things are, maybe not directly related with the fact that I keep finding myself fighting. But I know I got my start and I shared this with my phone call group. And while there is a video of this, I swear that it will not be seen. It is hidden somewhere. And I will not tell anybody where this video is. But I had to do a stage play. And it's a rock and roll version of a Shakespeare play.
Okay.
And so I played a Johnny Rotten type character, so singing a lot of punk rock. But then when I was off stage, or when those weren't the scenes, I also doubled as one of Madonna's boy toys.
Okay.
So when I was told,
how old were you with this?
This was my 20s.
A
while ago.
Okay.
So this is at least, I think the last time I did it was the last time they did the production was about 15 years ago.
Okay.
So that was the last time I did it. But the first time they mounted this production, I was in my mid 20s. And they're like, yeah, we'd like you to do, be one of the dancers, one of the backup dancers for the Madonna numbers. And then they described the costume, and I was like, oh, hell no. No, I'm not. That is not me. I'm the skinny kid, And so as part of my contract, I was like, all right, well, I want you to pay for boxing lessons. And I had done, up to that point, I had done Taekwondo because I wanted to know some martial arts. Moved up to Seattle and found a legit, started by a Shaolin monk who fled the Boxer Rebellion and arrived in Seattle and started a Kung Fu school. And so when I moved to Seattle, I did Kung Fu for a while. But then when I had to do this show and I had to be in a, fairly revealing outfit with the bowler hat and the strappy top and these bike shorts and combat boots. And it was full on
Madonna.
Madonna. Yeah. I was like, oh God.
Yeah.
And so I said, hey, for part of my contract, I needed to pay for these boxing lessons.
Because you wanted to get in shape.
Yes,
okay.
yes. I was like, I gotta, and of all kind of martial arts, kind of combat sports, at that time, MMA hadn't really taken off.
Yeah.
It was still, Pride was still kind of the big thing. UFC wasn't even a rumor at that point. And you looked around and you're like, oh, the boxer physique. Okay. Yeah. That I can do. So I got with this woman who was a professional boxer up in Seattle and did some training on the side. First thing she did was like, all right, you're doing 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, or 200 push-ups, 100 push-ups, 200 sit-ups, and 200 squats every night. That's your homework. And the first month was awful. But my pride, and the date of our opening performance was like, that's a real deadline. And there's wanting to be in shape. And then I'm going to be in front of hundreds of people. The curtain's going to go up and the lights are going to go on. And that's it. I can't hide. There's no hiding.
Talk about accountability. Right? Talk about specific
it was
deadlines.
incentive like you wouldn't believe, man. It's the most incentivized I've ever felt to be in shape. It was like, that was it. I've never felt that drastic of a need to do some push-ups.
Dude, we know the key for you, man.
I know exactly.
Very easy.
Exactly.
If you ever you ever have that challenge, like, oh, I got to get back in shape. Madonna number. That's what it is.
Right. Exactly. Just start dangling around some, leather strappy thing, and
Right.
I'll be like, all right. I'll do the push-ups.
Well, dude, let me rewind a little bit though. So,
Yeah.
you said you started off with Taekwondo. Was that your first introduction to like martial arts kind of stuff? Okay. And when was that? Were you a kid? Was it?
It was college.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, before that, like I said, we ran around, beating the hell out of each other with swords and shields and stuff. But it might as well have been a part-time job, because I'm in my stepdad's, he's a carpenter. I'm in his wood shop, like looking for the hardest hardwood I can find, and, cutting it down on the bandsaw and sanding it down and making these things.
You weren't messing around.
No, there was no messing around. And I was right in the middle age group. There were some older kids and there were some younger kids. And so on a good day, there would be fewer older kids out playing, and I'd be able to be on the big kids team. More often than not, I was the biggest kid on the little kids team, which meant I just got my ass handed to me by guys that were bigger and stronger, and that no matter how hard I hit them, they never cried. But you
had an example to follow, huh?
it was hardcore. Yeah. And like I said, I've got scars from from growing up, which is awesome. I love it. Yeah. They're awesome stories now. At the time, it was like, I need to know how to defend myself. I need to know how to at least be able to like defend myself with the stick while I'm running backwards.
Yeah.
And not trip over my own self.
Yeah. Jesse, I'm it's only been a little bit we're talking here, but I'm noticing a pattern a little bit in terms of you putting yourself in situations where I've got to defend myself because I'm getting beaten. I've got to get in shape because I've got this thing coming up soon.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like in my 12-year-old, he pointed out the other day, he was over at our grandparents' house, and he pointed out that they have, marks on the wall for when I was growing up, and then they have marks for him now, and they have marks for Murphy, the 2-year-old. And Rowan pointed out to me, like he was 11 and a half, so it was almost a year ago. He was as tall at 11 and a half as I was when I was 14.
Wow.
I was a tiny kid growing up. Right now I'm 5'10", depending on my beer intake, anywhere between about, 180, 190. So, growing up, it was, even if by like age, I could kind of be in the middle of the age group for kids down at Salmon Beach. I was still like, there were kids that were older than me that had always been bigger, so that, I think that played a factor into it, just, figuring out really early that if I couldn't physically defend myself, that I needed to either be funny, have some way of verbally disarming other people, like, either through comedy or through just like being ridiculous, seeming off kilter enough that, dude, this guy's kind of crazy. I don't know what he's going to do. Like all of these ways to kind of protect myself, because I couldn't physically until I was in high school. And that's the first time I caught up with everybody. So then when I got to college, I was like, wait a minute, not that, I ever like picked a fight, but I was like, actually, I don't have to, like, with this guy getting in my face, talking shit, saying whatever, I don't actually have to go, oh yeah, dude, no, that's really funny. I can actually say, you know what, piss off, dude, go away. And more likely than not, that will happen because people are just not used to somebody not backing down. It's, and I kind of figured that out in college. Taekwondo was the martial art that was kind of available close to the school.
Okay.
And my girlfriend took it at the time. So, I was like, hey, yeah, cool. I'll take that with you.
Yeah.
But it did. I mean, it certainly, I'd been a gymnast when I was younger. Being a stage performer, I was always having to do dance and physical things. And then in college, I studied stage combat, which is basically, sword fighting and unarmed combat for stage and film.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that stuff I was really able to master it really quickly.
So then you had a lot of practice growing up on the beach with it anyway.
Right.
So
right. Running around leaping logs trying to get away from the older guys. I mean, makes you nimble.
Yeah.
So then in Taekwondo, I gravitated towards it because of all the kicks. And I was like, flexible, I've got decent balance. I like this.
What was it about that stuck out for you? Like, was it such that you weren't, you were doing a lot of like stuff, sword play, right? A lot of upper body kind of stuff. And then this was just kind of a new sensation for you. They're like, oh, this is really interesting.
I think it was more that, I think it's the first thing that I did where you were actually making contact with another person, that wasn't, kids playing with swords. It was like, you're actually being taught. This is how you kick high enough to hit somebody in the chest. This is how you kick high enough to hit somebody in the face. And you're practicing these things. And that was the first time that I'd ever really encountered that. And then I think like a lot of people who progress through various martial arts, I discovered that, wow, it's great if you can keep the person about your leg's length away. It's fantastic. Once they get past that, oh, holy crap, I'm in trouble. I had a good friend that wrestled in high school, and we would start messing around, and eventually, he was bigger than me, stronger than me. It didn't matter how hard I kicked him when we were messing around. He would grab me and, throw me down on the ground, and I'm like, all right, how do I this? Ouch, that hurt.
Yeah, I hear.
So yeah.
How long did you were you doing Taekwondo then? How long did you stay in that and practice that?
I did that for a couple of years.
Okay, a couple of years. Okay, just through college.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And once I moved up to Seattle, then I got kind of left Taekwondo and got into Kung Fu.
Okay. Now, wait, you moved to Seattle because of the Kung Fu, or was it because?
No, because of acting.
Okay, gotcha. But that was something that. So how were you introduced to the Kung Fu piece of it? Were you walking by one day?
Looking. No, I was looking. They have the International District in Seattle is it's very cool, very cool area of town, and it's I think I was probably living there for about a year, maybe a year and a little more, before I realized I was like, oh man, I need to get back into something. I was still doing a lot of the stage combat. I was actually both as an actor and as a choreographer. So I'd be hired to do like choreograph fights in different plays. Did a couple student films and things like that. Kind of helping choreograph the stunt work and the fights. But I wasn't doing anything myself. So then I just kind of started looking around, and I mean, the place that I found was like so legit. It was like, I gotta go there. Yeah. I mean, even if I don't fall in love with Kung Fu,
yeah, I
want to at least be able to say, yeah, I studied Kung Fu at this place. So that's kind of what that one was about, was just trying to find something.
But going, because the way that you put it too was like, because you had this bit with the Taekwondo, that was fun, and then you just ended up leaving. But it sounded like you had an itch to scratch.
Yeah.
Right. You had something inside you, which is interesting, because I think it's an interesting way to put it, because I think it's something that's common amongst folks that really can appreciate fighting sports, fighting martial arts. You know?
Well, I think part of it through talking to Bauer, obviously, I wrote the blog piece, before I really connected with anybody in the alliance over kind of combat sports stuff. But while I was in Seattle, I had the experience. That's when I started doing the boxing training, and I mean, it started off as not wanting to look like a skinny ass white kid up on this stage. my dancing partner, he was this 6'1", African American guy, had been dancing since he was like 4. Phenomenal shape, and way like he outdanced me. He looked so much better than me on stage. It was ridiculous. The guy is now. I mean, he's on Broadway in New York now, in The Lion King, and he's been in The Lion King for the last decade. I mean, the guy he's phenomenal. And knowing that was the other half of our, Madonna duo, is like, gee, what the hell can I do? I mean, it started off as kind of a pride thing, but really rapidly. I mean, once Carla broke out the pads and we're hitting the pads, and once at one point she's like, "Wow, you have really heavy hands. You hit hard." And I'd never been told that my entire life. Interesting. I'd never been told that I actually had, I'd been told I was fast. I've been told I was flexible. Never in my life have been told that I can be physically powerful.
Well, think like, if Taekwondo, a lot of focus was on the kicking, right? And then I don't know much about the Kung Fu side of it, but from what I've seen of that, it's a lot of very quick movements, right? Not so much very heavy, not a lot of full power stuff.
There's a lot of work with channeling that power, but in terms of just like raw punching, kicking power, no. I mean, and I took Kung Fu for like a couple of years again. So I didn't progress to the level where you become a true Kung Fu badass.
But did you work with weapons at the time as well?
No, I never got to the point where I got to do any serious weapon work. I think I got to touch a couple of them once when one of the guys
slapped your hand. That's not for you, man.
Here you go. You can hold it for a second, but give it right back.
Yeah, right.
So it was really when I got to boxing, and it was, it's that proprioceptive contact you're making. It's like you're feeling the glove hit this object. I mean, it could be. I loved the pads. I love doing pad work. There were a couple of guys who actually were training to be boxers. And I was not. I had no interest in actually competing. But I loved training with them. And I loved being the guy holding pads for them because, they would hit so hard. This guy worked on oil rigs in Alaska, and, for their downtime, they eat, sleep, and work out. I mean, that's it. So this guy's a beast. He was like 6'4", this just giant. And I loved holding pads for him. I mean,
what was it about that?
I was like, well,
because like most other folks, particularly where I train, and most of the time I'm there, like I'm instructor, but even before that, like I'm holding for other people, they're holding for me. Particularly times they're holding for me, and is before I really had a much more control of like, this is an actual person that's taking this damage as opposed to there's a person behind the pad kind of thing. It's not like the heavy bag that can take
this
whatever.
This person is actually absorbing
this. Person is absorbing this stuff.
Right.
And there are times that I've held for other people that I didn't really enjoy it most of the time. But you're like the way you're talking right now, it's like, man, you all gotta get in line for this. You gotta sign up for this.
Right. And I think part of it is it's just that I don't know. I mean, okay, I was gonna say it's there's something about being that close to just like raw physical power. But I also know that the guy, like the oil rig guy that I worked with. Thank you, sweetie. I also know he was not hitting as hard as he could. Yeah. He would have dislocated my shoulder. I mean, the guy was truly a beast. The whole problem was he couldn't find somebody big enough and strong enough to spar with or hold pads for him to ever like go 80% even. So then he got in the ring and he's like, I'm allowed to hit this guy hard. Okay. But I mean, I worked with him, and the other person I worked with the most was a kid. I mean, I was in my mid-20s. He was 19, but he'd been boxing since he was about 13. And the kid he was fast. He's the only time the only time I ever walked out of the ring was sparring with this kid. And it's, we did a couple of rounds where it was like first round, you're just jabbing. At this point, I was doing self-defense jiu-jitsu at the same time.
Okay.
So my fear level was much lower. There was no question in my mind that if I was allowed to kick the kid in the legs, if I was allowed to single leg, double leg takedown, if I could touch him with anything other than a strike with my hands, no challenge. Like the depth of there being no challenge was astounding to me because this kid was so good at boxing. I was like, yeah, I'll get clipped once.
Yeah. And
that I knew that. So I was one of the only people at the gym that was kind of unafraid of mixing it up with him. Because I knew, you're hitting me over and over again. Yep. And I'm still coming at you because I know my hook works. You leave your elbows up, I'm hitting your body. And I know that if it really came down to it, I could defend myself.
But you had this additional stuff. So you were already you're doing the boxing, and then concurrently you were also doing jiu-jitsu classes as well, BJJ.
Yeah, I got into and it was when I started to take the boxing a little more seriously. It was the show had closed, and I was like, yeah, but I'm not stopping with the boxing.
Okay,
this is great. And it was, like I said, I mean, it started off as a physical appearance thing. But I lived on Capitol Hill in Seattle, and it's, at the time, I mean, it's been gentrified in the last 15, 20 years since I've been there. But at the time, I mean, it was, all the gay bars in Seattle were up there. And I loved that part of it. I just like the culture part of it, like all the good coffee shops, Capitol Hill. The kind of the cool up and coming restaurants, Capitol Hill, the good clubs to go out at night, Capitol Hill, but it could be rough, and I mean, I had, at one point I was walking down the street with a 6-pack of beer with my friend. And, like 5 or 6 kids followed us into the alley because they figured, a couple of gay guys, it's Capitol Hill. And, it was when we each took a beer bottle out and we're like, this is, you guys outnumber us, but somebody's getting hit with this and it's going to hurt. And, and luckily, the cops also arrived at about the same time. So I don't want to make it sound like it was just our willingness to defend ourselves, but it was really clear that we were. So the level of confidence I had just walking down the street was something that I'd never really felt before.
And this is when, was just with boxing, or like as particularly after, just with the boxing? I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah. So early on, I got done with the play. I keep up with the boxing because I just noticed, I'm walking down the street, and the intimidating teenage homeless kid that's coming up and kind of aggressively panhandling at me. You're not intimidating anymore. When I grew up in Tacoma, we had it was in the 80s, kind of a turf battle between the Crips and the Bloods at that time. And so, drive-by shootings, and unfortunately Tacoma became fairly famous for it for about 3 or 4 years. It was pretty bad. But, you just walked around. I mean, especially if my complexion and being small, and you walked around kind of just intimidated. So it was, doing boxing was the first time where I felt like, I don't feel that way anymore. And it actually took me a while to figure out that I didn't feel that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely, dude. I've had my moments.
Walking around and I'm like, I feel more confident. I feel like, what's going on? Oh, it's because I'm not walking around friggin' scared.
Yeah. I'm not tired after my walk because so tense. And, oh, wow, I feel like I got more energy.
Yeah, you're just like, oh, no, it's all good, whatever. Yeah. And a friend of mine who I used to be in theater with, he was like, hey, I know this guy. He's developing his own martial arts system, and he wants people to basically be guinea pigs. So Sensei Rusalez, his first name is also Jesse. So he and I give each other endless crap about that. But he had done Aikido, a black belt in Aikido, had gone through jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu to black belt. And then had toyed around with a couple other things. But his weak spot was strikes with the hand. So I was like, I will teach you a wicked jab. Like here's how you throw, how you throw your hands more effectively. So I would, he and I did a lot of kind of sparring with boxing to train him up. And then he kind of ran us through his system, and it was very self-defense oriented. I think, like I mentioned in the blog post, when I finally came back to jiu-jitsu just recently in the last year or so, it's like I'm getting my ass handed to me so regularly. I mean, I'm a true white belt, but part of it's because it's like, the stuff that I do remember, you can't do in the BJJ school. It's like that's not a legal move, and that actually is kind of nasty to do so to somebody that you want to have any kind of relationship with.
Right.
And so it was a lot of. I would say it was almost like the Krav Maga version of jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
He like took, what works,
less sports, like, more.
Yeah. He's like, there's no sport to this. This is,
you're not training to go. You're not training to go to tournaments.
No. This was very much, and we actually had a part of the class that I love that I haven't seen duplicated anywhere else, where it was called open form. And you took turns because it wasn't fair for one person to do it all the time. So you switched with your partner, and you basically, one person got to dictate the situation. So for instance, I would say, hey, Matt, you're going to stand over here. You're at a cash machine. So your head is down. You're looking here, both hands out of your pocket in front of you. And I'm going to be behind you. Go. And I got to do like whatever move. I had to attack him, and he had to figure out how to defend himself. And it would get ridiculous. You'd be like, okay, you're on the ground on your stomach. I've got you in this chicken wing with your arm behind your back, and I'm cranking it up, and I'm lifting your wallet out of your pocket, and your face is on the ground. Okay, go. And you're like, really? How about you just take my wallet? I mean, but so it was very much geared towards what was practical self-defense. Nothing like, nothing wasted, nothing fancy. It was dead simple. When I started reading books on Jeet Kune Do, I was like, oh, that's what Jesse was teaching us. It's like, what's the target? What's the weapon that's going to get there? And what's the one or two ways to get there that work best for you? Forget the rest of it. So a lot of, the flying axe kick that I learned in Taekwondo, he was like, yeah, that looks really fancy. Now here, try that again. And I'm like, oh, great. Now I am on my stomach in a chicken wing, and that sucked.
Right. Well, let me ask you though, because that's an interesting perspective to have, because you some folks start off in one style, one discipline, one school, and then they just stay there for the rest of their time in martial arts. And then, a few of those folks, they'll carry that torch to open up their own school, spread the same thing over and over. That's a lot of what the traditional martial arts are, right?
Right.
You started off with that a bit, and then you were opened up to a lot of other possibilities. But you had a thirst for it in any case, right? So how does now, like after, going to the boxing, then you got a bit of jiu-jitsu under your belt, then you've got, you've got this with this new form that you're working through with more self-defense. How does that shape your perspective on where you'd come from, or some of those other styles that are out there now?
Yeah, I think what it comes down to is I have a deep respect for, well, I don't want to say I don't respect the more traditional forms, because I do. I mean, they all came out of the need for an individual to be able to defend themselves against somebody who was bigger, stronger, had weapons. I mean, you're not going to get into a physical hand-to-hand confrontation with another human being unless you absolutely have to. And if you're trying to figure out the best way to use your bare hands or your bare feet to defend yourself or hurt another person, it's because the other person has some sort of advantage. You're not going to say, hey, we're both equal, so let's punch each other. No, from what I've studied, almost all traditional martial arts have this background in, well, it was developed like Aikido, Judo, having its roots in the fact that, like, yeah, if you lose your sword, your opponent still has theirs. You can either stand there and die, or here's what you can do. You get in super close, you control their body, and so I have a deep respect that that's where many of the traditional art forms came from. I start to lose interest. I start to lose patience when kind of the tradition takes over. I have if it's practical, I love it. I did Krav Maga for a little while. I've bounced all over the place. But part of it was because I just kept saying, this is the most practical self-defense. I was like, okay, awesome. I would still be doing it the gym was just not to my liking. It didn't have I didn't kind of have the vibe that I wrote about in the article. It was more of it almost felt like, going to 24-hour fitness.
Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
Here's the new curriculum.
And you signed the contract, and it was a year contract, and you come to class, you don't come to class, you're still getting charged, and you can't get out of it for a year. And I'm like, well, but I don't know if I'm going to like this in 3 months.
Vibe is a really big deal. I think that it's hard to pinpoint unless you've actually gone through it a little bit. Like gone through where it's not just and I'm sure it can apply to a lot of different environments, right? But particularly in martial arts, because there are real consequences for that vibe not being there. If you got a bunch of yahoos in there, if you got a bunch of testosterone or that type of thing, or just people that don't really have your best interest in mind. Right. And you can get, there's danger. So and that's something that I think it may take a little bit for some folks to find their place. Find the place that really meshes up with who they are and what they're looking for. Well,
and I think there's also part of it where, like any other physical pursuit, if all you want is just the physical skill, there are 1.5 million places you can go.
Okay.
If all you want is a skill, you don't have to be selective at all. Okay. And you can go to a really good school.
Okay.
And if all you want is a skill, great. You can walk in, you can go to class, you can walk out, you have the skill. Awesome. And there are plenty of schools that's what they do. And that's fine. I just think, knowing, and I don't know if it's being a bit ADD or if it's, having been involved in the arts for so much of my life. I have a need for something that gets a little deeper, that hits a little deeper on the, not even just excitement level. There has to be
stakes.
There has to be stakes. There has to be, a benefit to commitment. There has to be a connection with the other people there. Because you can spar with somebody, but if you're sparring with somebody, and kind of like you said, if you're sparring with somebody not just to make yourself better, but you're also sparring to take care of this other person, and to you keep leaving that elbow up. I'm gonna keep left hook is gonna keep coming.
The tough love's coming, man. Elbow. Tough love.
It's like if you're coming at it from that angle, I don't mind going home with sore ribs. If you walk in and you're just like, you lifted your elbow and you just nail that floating rib and walk away and you're like, whatever, protect yourself, man. I'm like, I have no time for you. And that, I think that's the difference. For me, that feeling that, that we're all on the mat together, we're all in the ring together. And just that, the couple of times where I found myself in a class or in a school where it is that kind of Hey, today's 3 skills we're learning are this. So go ahead and do your warm-ups and I'll be back in 15 minutes to show it to you. I'm like, I don't know anybody there. Nobody in there knows me. And even if you're sparring, which is an incredibly intimate thing to do, especially in jiu-jitsu, wrestling, where you are like chest to chest, chest to face. I mean,
sweat to
like,
sweat.
it is some of the grossest I've been in my life.
Yeah.
There have been positions that I've been in. I mean, anybody that's wrestled or done jiu-jitsu, you're like, okay, this is uncomfortable on many levels. and unfortunately I can't move. You're like, I'm trapped here and this sucks. But I mean, even just like I watched my son go through this, and we've all, anybody that's grappled has been there, where you're being sprawled on, right? And if you're not okay being in that space where somebody with no effort whatsoever is able to restrict all of your movement, restrict your breathing, and you can fight as hard, you can buck as hard as you want, and if they're good, it's just like they might as well be an octopus and holding onto the floor. It's like there's nothing you can do. The helplessness that you feel in those moments is something that I don't think most of us get to experience in a very real physical way very often. So to do that without there being trust, I don't think you can. I think that's when, somebody walks out of the gym, doesn't come back. For me, that's kind of the deciding factor. It's like, if I can be in this place where I'm feeling 100% helpless, I cannot defend myself, and I'm okay with that, and I'm actually like, okay, just breathe, just keep breathing, I'm going to give myself to the count of 10 to think of something, then I'll tap, but I'm not going to tap quite yet. If I can be in that headspace, then I know I'm in a good place. I know I'm with good people. I know I'm in a good training center. And I watched, my son, I got him into jiu-jitsu.
That was it, and this is his first foray into martial arts, is BJJ?
Yes, okay. It is. And he was, he's kind of interested, and I was like, well, here's what you're doing. And, both his mom, her boyfriend, who I'm good friends with, so it wasn't like a weird thing. Yeah. He was like, have you thought about like karate or something like that? And I was like, he's taking jiu-jitsu. Playing the dad card. He's taking jiu-jitsu. And he just like the phone call. I would get phone calls at like 11 o'clock at night after he'd gone to bed from like his mom or from Chris. And he'd be like, he was like sobbing today after class. I'm like, yeah, it was a tough class. He's doing jiu-jitsu. It's like, we have a deal. You try something new, you do one season of it. And I was like, yeah, jiu-jitsu, a season is at least 3 tournaments, which can take up to a year. So and he, like his first tournament, the girl he was fighting in the first, in his very first fight, she sprawled, and I was sitting there watching it. Her dad is obviously the coach of the teacher at the school. He's sideline coaching her. He's like, just sprawl, don't move. And I'm like, oh, come on. This is his first thing. Move, do something. Give him an opening. And he lost. He came back crying. And I was just like, dude, I know that sucked. She sprawled. It sucks. Nothing feels worse than just being helpless. So just take this moment, take about 30 seconds, cry as hard as you need to, and you have another round. So let's breathe. Taught him some circle breathing, in, hold it, out, hold it. And he went back in, beat the next kid, and then he had to go up against her again. And he walked out there. They did the little, handshake, fist bump, and he took one big step back, and his whole face just went neutral mask, like nothing up there. And I was like, oh, she lost. Yeah. Because she's kind of bouncing on her feet, and he just went like totally like dead still with that blank look on his face. I was like, oh, okay. And yeah, I mean, they clashed. He like none of that. She tried to sprawl again. He had her back, and she tapped out, and he walked off and was like, so I think I kind of like this. This is okay. And I was like, there you go. You survived one of the most uncomfortable moments you can have. And not only did you survive, but then you got the opportunity, which you don't always get, to then meet that person again, and you won. And so it's been cool to see him, as this 12-year-old kid who is just entering that part of his life where he's starting to kind of adventure into thinking about things for himself instead of always referring to dad or mom. And he's starting to discover that, discover his strengths, discover his weaknesses, and he's doing it in the context of something that is extremely physical. He's not he didn't get my flexibility and my light-footedness gene. I mean, he's a solid kid. So he sees me do stuff.
Had he done other sports as well prior to this?
He does baseball. He tried soccer, but I mean, he's just not fast.
Yeah.
So despite being told by myself and his stepmom Mickey, who's played soccer, like no, that just means your defense. Be that guy that's like, yeah, now come. You just ran all the way down this field. Now come get around me. He was just like, no, but the cool kids are the fast ones who are always making the goals, and so he kind of gave up on that one. But with jiu-jitsu, I mean, he's really homed in on the fact that if he just like slows down, takes a breath, plays his game, then he more often than not is successful. I'm like, oh, there you go. Dad, job done. I'm 47 and I still have not quite got that concept nailed. And there you go. Yes. And he learned it on the mat. Yeah. I love that. I absolutely love it.
There's very few places that you can get tested to that level, particularly at such a young age, right?
Yeah.
Where you've got, and I know for me, with my girls in tournaments and that stuff, it's very different. They're not, they're doing a little bit of grappling now, but just the environment of it, right? When we talk about, how would you, self-defense. Think about, okay, well, you train for the knife, you train for the gun to take ways, or that type of stuff. You train for multiple opponents. Yet there's very little we can do in terms of really replicating that real. And I tell my students all the time, hey, listen, physical part of it, and the techniques, we got that covered.
Yeah.
Mental part of it, we got a little bit of that covered, because I'll tell you a little bit of what to do, but you're going to start learning how to think about it there. Thing I cannot help you with is right in here, man. I got nothing to give you. I got nothing to give you.
And that's even, like I said, at 47, and I took some time off. I mean, I had, when Roan was born, that's right around the time I was driving ambulance. I mean, and what I should have been doing, I should have been getting back into the gym. And I didn't. What I did was I started drinking in the morning. And, because I'd get off work at 6 a.m. after, 48 hours of no sleep and seeing things that I was just like, I want to unsee this. And so instead of like pushing through and getting in there and hitting something, I picked up the bottle and it's taken years to manage that. In a way that's now healthy, but then when it came time for when I started to see my son starting to grapple with some of the same issues, some of the self-consciousness issues, some of the getting ready to be a teenager, and I'm like, there are things he's going through that I'm starting to not be able to help with, because quite honestly, I'm still working on myself, my self-image.
Absolutely,
man. I gotta work on that every freaking day, and I'm speeding towards 50.
Yeah.
So how can I help this kid? And it was it was like one of the questions we got for the July thing. When did you feel your most basically comfortable in your own skin? And I was like, it was when I was boxing and grappling. And being able to introduce him to that. And I wanted to get on the mat again so bad. I walked into that school and I was like, oh, they got a great kids program. And then I saw the adults and I was like, oh God, that looks good. And I gave him a year, like a calendar year before I signed up for a class, because I wanted it to be his.
Oh, wow. Wow, man. That's wow.
And it was tough. I actually, they don't have a place for parents to sit. And I eventually got told, hey, so most parents drop their kid off.
Yeah.
And but
Yeah.
I'm like trying not to side coach, but I'm sitting there muttering under my breath,
Sure.
sweep,
Yeah.
get the leg.
Right.
So after a year, I was like, I'm signing up now. Got back into kickboxing, a bit into jujitsu, but the timing of it is rough. So, it's like probably 2/3 kickboxing and then, jump in the gi and get twisted around by all the youngsters in the gym. But being able to introduce him to something where he is getting to experience the fact that he's having to learn something and he can only figure it out for himself. Coach, me, anybody else, I can say, well, here's what worked for me. Here's what I think of. Almost 100% guaranteed that's not going to work for you. But that's what worked for me.
Yeah.
And I had to kind of get there.
Right.
And parts of it kind of sucked.
That's exactly it.
I kept getting my ass handed to me.
That's right. That's right.
And to watch him start to make that progress, I'm like, I think that's, well, in a lot of ways, I'm like, that gives me hope for him becoming a teenager. And, it's like he's already getting to experience the fact that, dad doesn't have all the answers. And some of dad's answers don't work for me. But dad is still out there trying. Dad is still out there growing. I told him, I was really frank with him. I took a jujitsu class, one of my first couple of classes, and I kind of like went into white belt deathmatch mode. Like I started like not being able to control what was going on. And my last memory of jiu-jitsu was back when I was training. And I'm like, no, I'm one of the better people here. What the fuck is going on? But here's this like white belt with 2 stripes on her belt, and she's kicking my ass. And I started to kind of physically lose control. I started to go into that panic mode and that white belt deathmatch. And so I just stopped. I just tapped. I was like, tapped. And she's like, oh, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I said something about like, I'm having some vertigo thing.
Yeah.
And then I just stopped going to jiu-jitsu, and I actually talked to the owner, and he's like, hey, what happened? I was like, I freaked out. And it's because, I was in a headspace where I realized I'm wanting to basically start going into that. I need to physically do whatever I can to get out of this. Yeah. And that's not good. That's not safe. Somebody's going to get hurt. Yeah. Me, the other person, that's not cool. And I actually talked to Rowan about it, talked to my son about it. I was like, yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways it's starting over. I mean, and so that feeling you had when you first started and you were like, oh my gosh, I can't do anything. I'm like, yeah, guess what? Dad was there last week. Dad's taking the next week off, because dad can do that. No, you can't take the next week.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
So giving him the opportunity to see that in a way that's not personal to him,
right.
It's he's seeing in the context of something that we share, is really, really cool. I mean, I think in a lot of ways in terms of, fatherhood, I think that's been the biggest benefit of getting back into it, is that he gets to see me struggle. He gets to see me going, oh man, I could dig my knuckle in here and get you off of me, but that's not kosher. So I'm not going to, which means, okay, I'm tapping again.
Right.
And guess what? I'm learning a hell of a lot. So there you go.
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Dude, we could freaking talk for another 5 hours, man. Like even just today. I mean, so we're definitely gonna hook up again. But I mean, just that alone, man, in terms of like you having this shared experience now with your boy. I mean, just not only in terms of like, oh yeah, we have the same hobby. It's like, yeah, I can share my vulnerabilities with him. Yeah. And it's okay to do that. Very challenging, I think, for most, and I'm speaking from experience, most parents to just kind of allow that to happen. Whereas, because 90% of the day we're saying, do this, do that, because that's the thing. In their mind, we're right all the time, right?
Right.
Whether they like it or not, it's like we have the answer. That's why we're telling you what to do.
Right.
But it's very challenging, and it's very rare, the opportunities that you can put yourself in that vulnerable spot for them to see. Like, you know what? I don't have that. And then wow, but being able to do that, just flips it all, it kind of sweeps everything over, right? And now it's like you're in control. It's like, oh my gosh, this completely changes the dynamic of our relationship, particularly like you're saying, for your boy, the age that he's going into now, that
Right.
part of life that he's into now, you know?
Right. Well, and to see, I think it's, to see him recognizing that, yeah, we both struggle with it, and we struggle with very different stuff. Like the things that he struggles with are things that I'm like, I've never had that challenge. I've always been fast. I've always been flexible. Strong, not so much.
Yeah.
He's physically just a stronger kid than I ever was. So his problems are dealing with, people that are flexible and fast. And so for him to see that we're both struggling with it, but we're struggling with such different stuff.
Yes.
And that means I don't always have the answer for him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you about that, because I've never actually struggled with that. That's always been something that has been simple. But here's the thing, buddy. I also struggle with this part, which is something that I notice you don't even think twice about.
You got no problem with this one.
That has been, it's been huge. It's been awesome. And from a very dad perspective, it's something that I notice, hopefully sometime later, in his late 20s, 30s or whatever, he'll go, oh yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah.
But, every once in a while for now, it's still like, yeah, Dad, yeah, I'm still doing jujitsu.
Yeah.
So, yeah. He'll get there.
Jesse Hinds,
one day.
this was awesome, man. I love it.
Oh, man. No, so we got to do round 2 sometime. Yeah, we got to.
Absolutely, dude.
This has been fun. This has been fun.
Folks, I hope you appreciated that conversation with Jesse. Again, it was just a blast for me to have that chat with him, and I'm looking forward to having him on again, just because it was so much fun. Just love to hear his perspective. We didn't get into it in the interview itself, but if you'd like to get more of Jesse and his thoughts, particularly around martial arts and training, you can go to his blog at ridingthecurrents.blog and find out about some of the things he's thinking about there, and get more of him. But that is it for this episode. This is Philip with the Everyday Fighter Podcast. We'll talk to you next time.